That's close enough. Folks like you don't fit in this neighborhood. The sentence, clean and cold as the steel blades in his grip, would come to define Officer Hank Mercer's career. Dr. Elena Ruiz stood in the bright spill of a late morning sun, mid-40s and composed, on Oak Creek Lane's manicured sidewalk where old maples braided shade over stone walls. She'd been on her daily walk, admiring the stately facades, when she saw it. A storm-split oak limb sprawled across the walk and into the lane. A real hazard. Acting like any responsible neighbor, she'd called the non-emergency line. This was the response, Mercer blocking her path, lip curling. He wasn't merely in her way. He occupied the space like a checkpoint. Presence turned into a warning that her being here was somehow an intrusion. He'd grabbed heavy garden shears, probably yanked from his trunk, ostensibly to clear the limb. But his focus wasn't the wood. It was Elena, specifically the charcoal silk dress skimming her knees, stitched with pale magnolias. "See this branch?" he said, wagging the shears lazily. "This is our problem." His gaze slid back to her, hardening. "You, different kind of problem." Elena's stomach tightened, but her tone stayed even. "Officer, I reported a safety issue. That limb could injure someone." He cut her off, eyes glinting. "I'm handling it," he snapped. "What I'm not handling is your kind strolling where you don't belong, probably casing houses." He planted his boots wider, staking ground. The shears clicked open, then closed. Snap, snap. A jarring metronome under birdsong and leaf rustle. "This is a nice street. We keep it that way." His stare dipped to the dress again, something proprietary and ugly stirring. "Pretty fabric. Too pretty for someone like you. What's the price tag?" Elena straightened, shoulders settling. She'd practiced medicine for more than 2 decades. Children's ICU, the worst nights anyone could imagine. And in his eyes, she was a stereotype with legs. "My attire is not your concern," she said, voice flat and steady. "Will you take my statement or not?" Mercer barked out a quick laugh. "Statement? Honey, your being here is the statement." He moved half a step closer. The shears talked again. Snip, snip. Obscene in the clean light. "That dress, provocative, distracting. Sends messages people don't like around here." His partner, Officer Troy Dalton, leaned on the cruiser, expression sanded down to boredom, making no move to intervene. He'd watched this performance enough times to know the beats. Elena's jaw flexed once. "Last time," she warned, lowering her voice to a calm register. "Step aside. You're obstructing my path." "Or what, file a complaint?" Mercer's sneer widened. "Do it! Goes in the same stack as all the other Officer Mercer was mean bedtime stories." He lifted the shears, steel flashing. "Let me help with that dress code violation." Before Elena could pivot, he lunged. The blades bit into silk just below her hip with a soft, ripping gasp. Mercer dragged down, scissoring the magnolias in half. The charcoal fabric peeled apart, bared skin from thigh to knee. It wasn't about clothing. It was a deliberate, humiliating mark, a message carved without blood. "You don't belong. You're nothing." The ruined silk fluttered. A magnolia petal thread dangled in the breeze. Elena didn't scream. She didn't flinch. Something colder than anger sealed inside her, a glacial stillness that sharpened everything to edges. She memorized his badge, 714, fixing the numbers with the same focus she used for lab values and med doses at 3 a.m. She filed the curl of his mouth, the satisfaction pooling in his eyes, the way Dalton finally looked over, lips quirking. She recorded the positions, the shadows, the sun's angle, the neighbor's blinds. "There," Mercer said, admiring his cut like a tailor who hated his client. "Fits your station better." He tossed the shears onto the grass and turned toward the fallen limb as if finished. "Now be on your way. Go back to wherever you came from before I find something else to trim." Elena stood very still. The dress hung in a neat, vicious line. Over Mercer's shoulder, She read the green enamel of the street sign at the corner. Oak Creek Lane. Lovely name. Ugly memory now. Mercer had no clue who she was. He had no idea that her husband, Chief of Police Daniel Ruiz, 50 and unflappable, sat in his office 2 miles away. He had no idea that the machinery he trusted was about to pivot, gravity reversing on his chest. He thought he'd taught another black woman her place. He'd miscalculated. At the downtown precinct, the air smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescents buzzed. Officer Mercer strode through the bullpen riding that post-confrontation high, adrenaline braided with the smug relief of impunity. The system worked, and he knew the levers. Time to write the symphony, he announced, dropping into his scarred chair. He pulled up the incident report template, blank cursor blinking like a cue. Dalton slid into the neighboring seat, boots on the desk, ready to riff. So what's our story? Jane Doe, hysterical, maybe tweaked? Dalton offered. Nah, Mercer mused, cracking knuckles. Give her teeth. Make her the aggressor. IA likes officer safety when the beats hit right. He began to type, narrating as his fingers skittered. At approximately 10:15 hours, officers Mercer and Dalton responded to a downed limb on Oak Creek Lane. Upon arrival, encountered unidentified female. Leave it blank for now. Hereafter. The subject. Subject acting erratic. Shouting about government conspiracies. Dalton tossed in, smirking. Good color, Mercer said, adding it. Subject appeared emotionally disturbed, possibly on an unknown narcotic. Brandishing a sharpened branch, Dalton said, arching a brow. Sharpened, Mercer repeated, loving the menace. Threatened officers. The lies blossomed on the screen, each one rooted in 1,000 old reports, coded language engineered to be believed. Agitated, non-compliant, aggressive, danger. They built their phantom together. Mercer typing, Dalton accessorizing. In their version, Elena became a volatile stranger whose every motion justified force. I attempted to disarm the subject, Mercer continued, warming to his fiction. She lunged, tore her dress on the same branch she weaponized. He paused, pleased, elegant, self-contained, explained the rip while casting him as calm and professional, a guardian surrounded by chaos. And her mouth? Dalton prompted. Mercer grinned. Oh, she launched a slur storm after. Threatened my badge, said she knew people. They both snorted. Perfect. The switcheroo. Plant the trigger words. Let bias do the rest. The template practically filled itself. What about the shears? Dalton asked, a shadow of caution crossing his face. We can't say she ran into those. Mercer didn't look up. The shears cleared the limb. Period. Never used on her. His tone dared argument. Body cam? Glitched again. Battery dropped on arrival. I'll note it for maintenance. Another box checked. Another page from the playbook. He ended strong, sprinkling sanctimony. Subject fled on foot, unidentified. Officers removed public hazard and returned to service. No further action required. He hit submit. In an instant, fiction calcified into a record. Mercer leaned back, arms overhead, spine popping, wearing victory like a fitted jacket. Another day, another win. He'd put a woman in her place, reasserted control, and sealed it with an official narrative tailor-made to withstand scrutiny. Who would anyone believe, a 14-year decorated veteran or a hysterical nobody from the wrong side of the river who couldn't keep her dress intact? He felt bulletproof in the armor of a system designed to accept his script. He didn't grasp that each keystroke hammered a nail into his own future. The bullpen hummed as calls rolled in. Phones trilled. Officers paced. He caught his reflection in the monitor. Squared jaw, uniform crisp. A man certain the thin blue line bent to his will. About an hour later, the lobby was its usual churn. Hard chairs, flickering TV tuned to local news, a handful of civilians waiting with paperwork clutched in tired hands. Mercer held court at the front desk, serving a sanitized hero cut of his mourning for Sergeant Walt Rourke, an old-timer with a map of cynicism in his face. She comes at me with this branch, sharp as a spear, Mercer said loud enough for the benches to catch it. Screaming, had to apply a compliance hold to disarm her. She tore her own dress, then cried, "Foul!" Rourke grunted without looking up. Sounds like a Tuesday. They get wilder every year. The glass door sighed open. A woman stepped in. Conversation thinned like someone lowered a fader. It was Dr. Elena Ruiz. She walked with deliberate calm that made space for itself, the cut in her dress hidden now behind a long coat, her expression serene as winter water. In her left hand, she carried a clear evidence bag. Inside, folded neatly, lay the charcoal silk with the clean, vicious slice, magnolias halved into white commas. She didn't look at Mercer. She went straight to the desk, eyes on Rourke. "Good morning, Sergeant," she said, voice carrying. "I'm here to file a report." Rourke's pen stalled mid-scribble. "A report about an assault," Elena continued, level and unmistakable. "Committed by one of your officers approximately 90 minutes ago on Oak Creek Lane." Mercer's mouth opened, disbelief swamping his practiced swagger. "That's her," he burst, pointing, color flushing back into his cheeks. "The woman I just told you about." He pitched his voice for the room. "Ma'am, you're in no position to file anything. You're lucky I didn't cuff you for assaulting an officer." Elena turned her head slowly and regarded him the way a clinician studies a rare contaminant on a slide. "Officer Mercer, badge 714?" she asked coolly. "You assaulted me. You cut my dress with shears." A ripple of discomfort moved through the cluster of uniforms nearby, a low, nervous sound like cloth against vinyl. Mercer's veneer cracked, revealing something raw and irritable beneath. This wasn't how the scene played. The target wasn't supposed to walk in bearing evidence. "That's a slanderous lie," he snapped. "I've already filed my report. You were unstable, a danger. You tore your own dress on a branch you swung like a weapon." He gestured toward the bag as if it proved him right. He was playing to the gallery and the familiar wall that had always closed ranks. He had his report. He had his partner. What did she have? Sergeant Rourke's brow creased as Elena's even tone thinned the room's noise. Mercer, sensing the ground under him shift, raised his voice and parroted his report like it was gospel. Subject became increasingly agitated when officers attempted verbal de-escalation. Elena didn't so much as glance at him. She set the clear evidence bag on the counter with careful hands. The torn charcoal silk looked like a museum piece. Fragile, damning. "I need the watch commander," she said. "A supervisory officer now." Rourke hesitated, torn between protocol and inertia. Mercer scoffed. "You're in over your head, lady." Elena's gaze stayed on the sergeant. "I'm not. Please call your supervisor." Mercer laughed, too loud, checking who'd laugh with him. "Garden shears? I was clearing a hazard. You were the hazard." He cocked his chin toward Dalton. "Tell him." Dalton's mouth opened, paused, closed. Elena looked up at the smoked dome of the lobby camera. "Does this lobby camera record audio?" she asked. Rourke shook his head. "Video, not audio." "Good," Elena said evenly. "Then it will show my posture, my distance, his advance, and the timestamps. We can compare those to his narrative." Mercer waved, dismissive. "Yeah, compare away." Rourke's pen hovered, then started moving. "I'll note that." Elena folded her hands. "And please preserve today's lobby footage." "The husband line again," Mercer sneered. "Let me guess, he's a lawyer." "Engineer," Elena answered, calm as a metronome. "And I'm a physician." A couple of civilians looked up at that. Titles carry in rooms like this. Mercer shrugged. "Your resume doesn't matter. Your behavior does." Elena's voice cooled. My behavior was calling the non-emergency line about a downed limb. Your behavior was approaching within 2 feet, weapon in hand, and cutting my clothing. Rourke scribbled, the paper rasping under his pen. Dalton shifted his weight, boot soles whispering against tile. If you intend to rely on your report, Elena added, you will want those recordings preserved intact. All right, Doc, Rourke said, sliding a complaint form across the counter, tone-turning textbook. Describe the incident from first contact. Mercer stepped closer, heat and impatience rolling off him. We're done, he told her. Take your tantrum to City Hall. Elena didn't move. You will not direct me out of a police station, she said. Her phone buzzed once. She glanced, then locked the screen. Rourke clocked it. You recording? He asked. I'm not required to answer that, Elena replied. But I will say the evidence here will include photos, time-stamped messages, and your own building's cameras. The sergeant's jaw worked. Noted, he said, and kept writing. Fake, Mercer announced. There are apps for everything. Elena's chin rose a fraction. Then you'll be eager to subpoena the original file and metadata. Dalton's boots squeaked against the floor. The noise seemed loud in the hush. Elena continued, voice low and precise. Sergeant, also note that the partner failed to intervene while Officer Mercer advanced with shears. Note his references to my kind, my presence, and my dress. Note the sequence, his move forward, the cutting action, the resulting damage. She didn't look at Mercer. She addressed the room like she was dictating a chart. Those details matter. They will continue to matter the longer this goes on. Mercer's smile thinned. You keep saying shears like I stabbed you. I cut fabric. Property, not person. Elena met his stare. Clothing is bodily adjacency, she said. Destroying it is a violation. You intended shame. A young officer behind the desk swallowed. Rourke cleared his throat and lifted the form again, more formal now. Let's proceed. Name, age, occupation. Dr. Elena Ruiz, she said. 46, pediatric intensive care. Mercer blinked at the age, recalculating. Address? Oak Creek Lane, she answered, and the lobby absorbed it. Not visiting, not lost. Home. A new quiet settled, the kind that follows an inconvenient fact everyone must decide to ignore or respect. So you live nearby, Mercer muttered, a wobble in his certainty. Walking in silk at 10 a.m.? Elena's mouth barely moved. Women wear clothes in daylight, officer. Rourke kept writing. Any injuries? No physical harm beyond the garment, she said. Emotional distress noted. Photos? Time-stamped. She laid printed stills beside the bag. The fractured limb, the open sidewalk, Mercer's stance, Dalton's distance, the sun's glint on steel. Where'd you get those? Mercer asked. Cloud backup, she said. Burst mode capture the moment the blades touched. Dalton studied the stills and couldn't make his face neutral. Sergeant, Elena added, please include the make and model of the shears in the record. Dalton dragged a hand over his jaw. Sarge, maybe we follow procedure, Rourke said, surprising himself with how firm it sounded. He paged a supervisor. The line chirped busy. Elena let the machinery spin. While we wait, she said, please secure the shears used in the assault. Mercer folded his arms. They're in the trunk because they were used on the branch. Then retrieve them, Elena replied. Chain of custody requires it. Rourke's look slid to Mercer. A beat. Dalton, get them, he said. Dalton hesitated, then took the keys, the lobby air tugging at his sleeves as he moved. Mercer watched him go, jaw tight, eyes brighter and meaner. Dalton slipped through the side door with the keys, carrying equal parts dread and relief. Silence stretched. Elena filled it with facts arranged like instruments on a tray. Officer Mercer approached within 2 feet. she said. He used racially coded language about my being here and made a sexualized comment about my dress. He then advanced with the shears and cut. Rourke wrote steadily, the scratch of his pen suddenly loud. Mercer leaned on the counter, aiming for insolent calm. You rehearsed that. I practice medicine, Elena said. Precision matters. Dalton returned with a paper sleeve containing the shears, the hinge marked faintly with dried sap. Elena didn't smile. She simply noted what anyone could see. Tree residue present doesn't negate misuse. Both can be true. Rourke's jaw flexed. Tag them, he said. Dalton slid the sleeve across. Elena kept her hands to herself. Photograph first, she said. Rourke lifted an eyebrow, as if to ask how she knew the rhythm here. Medical examiner rotations, she answered. I know your evidence rooms. Treat this like it matters. He nodded despite himself and used the desk tablet to capture angles, scale, and serial stamp. You think paperwork scares me? Mercer sneered. Elena regarded him like a tumor margin on imaging. Not frightening, just requiring accurate boundaries. Mercer rolled his shoulders as if the motion could fling off consequence. Whatever you think you've got, IA won't waste a coffee on it. The doors sighed, and a pair of civilians entered, registering the tableau and choosing seats with unusual care. Rourke finished the intake block and looked toward the corridor. Lieutenant's tied up, he said, uncertainty creeping back. Elena inclined her head. Then escalate further. Mercer snorted. To who? The mayor. To command, Elena replied, still mild. Given what occurred, the highest available level would be appropriate. Rourke's pen hovered, then scratched out one more note. The room felt like it had drawn a breath and held it. An officer hustled through carrying a stack of files and leaned into Rourke's ear. Whatever he whispered washed the color from the sergeant's face. Rourke nodded twice, then straightened, posture corrected by an invisible hand. Dr. Ruiz, he said, voice newly careful. Please remain right here. He lifted the phone and spoke in clipped coordinates. Lobby, citizen complaint. Cutting tool, body cam malfunction. Mercer tried on a laugh that wouldn't sit right. What is this, a parade? He asked, trying to pull the room back onto a stage. Elena didn't look at him. She stood very still, the way surgeons stand, making space for a reality that is about to arrive. An hour later, the precinct lobby pulsed with its familiar chaos. Phones chirping, printers spitting, a TV murmuring weather and headlines. Mercer held court at the counter, carving the morning into a heroic anecdote for Sergeant Rourke. Edges sanded, motives rearranged. He pitched his voice to Carrie, letting the civilians on plastic chairs absorb his cleaned-up version. Unstable woman, improvised spear, compliant restraint, public order restored. Rourke barely looked up, stamping forms with absent contempt. The tale landed like recycled air. It was at that precise tilt between noise and boredom that the doors parted with a hush and let in a different kind of weather. Cold, clarifying, consequential. Mercer, still mid-gesticulation, didn't notice the shift at first. He was inventing a flourish about the branch, sharpened like a pike. When the room's undertone changed, conversations thinned, eyes lifted, shoulders straightened. Elena Ruiz stepped in with a deliberate calm that pulled attention into orbit. Mercer's voice faltered, hunting for an echo. He recovered fast, slapping a palm on the counter. There she is, he announced, loud and performative. The subject I neutralized. Rourke finally glanced up, pen freezing. Elena crossed the tile without hurry, a clear evidence bag hanging from her left hand like a verdict. She didn't look at Mercer. She looked directly at the sergeant. Good morning, Sergeant, Elena said, even as arriving officers stalled mid-stride. She set the bag down gently, the torn charcoal silk folded with clinical precision, the pale magnolias halved into tidy grief. I'd like to file a report. The sentence carried quiet authority. It traveled farther than Mercer's volume ever could. He forced a laugh. You're not in position to file anything, he said. Lucky I didn't arrest you. Elena turned her head slowly, studying him like a peculiar contaminant. Officer Mercer, badge 714, she said, making each number clean. You cut my dress with shears. You did it while deploying racist and sexualized remarks. A faint ripple moved through uniforms and civilians, a physical murmur of discomfort. Mercer pointed, fluster tightening under his swagger. Slander. I've already reported accurately. She was erratic, swinging a branch. Tore her own dress. He gestured broadly at the bag, as if the artifact inside corroborated him. Elena looked back to Rourke. I request the watch commander, she said, and preservation of lobby footage for this hour, plus the exterior cam facing Oak Creek Lane. Rourke hesitated, torn between muscle memory and a tug of protocol stronger than habit. He slid a form across. Elena didn't sit. She began her account in crisp, measured sentences. She described the first moment, distance, angle, sunlight, proximity of the fallen limb. She mapped Mercer's approach. 2 feet, the shears lifted, then closed, the obscene punctuation of snip, snip in quiet air. She recorded the partner's failure to intervene. She cataloged the words, you're kind, don't belong, dress code, too pretty for you. Rourke's pen scratched with renewed attention, the sound suddenly assertive. Mercer cut in, scoffing. She rehearsed this. Elena didn't blink. In my work, she said, precision keeps people alive. She laid out still images, printed and time-stamped, angles of the scene, the glint of steel near fabric, Dalton's distance. The room leaned toward the paper. Mercer aimed for scorn and landed on shaky. Apps fake timestamps. Then subpoena metadata, Elena replied, tone cool as tile. Dalton shifted, boots whispering uneasily. Secure the shears, Elena added. Chain of custody. Rourke looked to Mercer. A beat stretched. Dalton, get them, the sergeant said. The partner took the keys, grateful for the errand, and ghosted through the side door. Elena continued, voice exact. Clothing is bodily adjacency. Cutting it is a deliberate humiliation. A rookie by the sign-in clipboard swallowed hard. Mercer folded his arms. No injuries, he declared. Property damage. Violation, Elena corrected. And bias. The fluorescent hum seemed louder, while everyone pretended not to hear. Dalton returned with a paper sleeve and a stiffness in his shoulders. He placed the shears on the counter. Sap flecked the hinge. A smear of charcoal thread clung to one blade, like a confession. Elena didn't touch them. Photograph before bagging, she said, and Rourke, annoyed to discover he agreed, snapped angles with the desk tablet, captured scale and serial markings, then sealed the sleeve. Mercer leaned in, trying to reassert altitude. You're lucky I didn't arrest you, he repeated, as if repetition could harden fiction into fact. Elena ignored him, addressing the sergeant. Please note, body cam malfunction was reported after the point of contact, not before. Mercer flicked a glance at Dalton. The partner kept his eyes on the floor. Elena's gaze returned to Mercer, calm enough to sting. You advanced with a cutting tool, she said. You targeted appearance. You used exclusionary language. Your partner looked away. Each sentence dropped into the form with weight. You're building a story, Mercer said. Thin smile. So are you, Elena answered. Yours is older. Rourke cleared his throat, dialed a number, and spoke into the phone in clipped code that translated to, we need someone with bars on their collar. Nearby chatter slowed to a weird, anticipatory hush, as if the building itself leaned forward to listen. Mercer tried to fill the vacuum. We de-escalated, he declared. She escalated. He looked around for nods, for the usual comforting grunts. Fewer arrived than he expected. Elena set one more printed still on the counter. Mercer's hand mid-arc, shears bright, her posture squared and stationary. The composition was almost painterly, evidence arranged by accident. "You tore your dress on a branch," Mercer insisted, voice threading high. "On the weapon you wielded." Elena glanced at Rourke's pen. "Please capture that phrasing," she said. "It matters that he calls a broken limb a weapon only when it suits him." The sergeant wrote, each letter feeling heavier than the last. Mercer planted his elbows on the counter, lowering his voice as if intimacy could reshape reality. "You don't get it. This is a nice neighborhood. People don't want strangers loitering." Elena inhaled once, slow. "I live there," she said. "Your assumption is noted." She tilted her head toward the Green Street sign, visible through the front glass, the name sharp as new paint. "Oak Creek Lane is my address. That limb, my sidewalk." Something like embarrassment nicked the room's armor. Dalton looked up and then away. Rourke underlined a line on the form, creating emphasis because he didn't know what else to do with his hands. Mercer shifted to the reliable script. "Subject made threats," he said. "Said she knew people." Elena looked directly at him. "I said I would file a report," she replied, "and that the report would be read." She turned to Rourke. "Please include that he invited me to go back where I came from." The sergeant's jaw worked. He wrote it down, each word feeling like grit between his teeth. A murmur from the door made heads turn. Two detectives paused, assessed, decided to wait. The lobby's air pressure seemed to change, like weather marching in from a horizon no one had bothered to check until now. "Sergeant," Elena said, "I'd like to speak to the person in charge." The request was calm, almost gentle, but it carried a steel core. Mercer barked a laugh, a sound he wished sounded freer. "Top brass over a ripped hem?" he scoffed. "File your tantrum and go." Elena didn't look at him. "You've preserved evidence," she said to Rourke. "You've taken a statement. The next step is command review." Rourke nodded because procedure demanded it, then hesitated because habit did not. The phone on the back wall rang and stopped, ringing again, insistent. An admin leaned out and jerked a thumb toward the executive corridor. Someone was coming. Mercer tried one last shove. "Lady, I'll tack on trespassing and false report. Keep pushing and I'll add resisting." He shifted his weight forward, an old intimidation dance that usually cleared space. Elena didn't retreat. She lifted her chin the smallest degree, like adjusting a microscope knob. "You won't," she said, "because you've already realized how many eyes are on you." It was true. The lobby had quietly rearranged itself into witnesses. Mercer's hand drifted toward his belt, instinct more than plan. Rourke made a quiet noise meant to be a warning and discovered it sounded more like a plea. The admin's thumb jerked again. "Now!" Mercer took a half step closer, the threat more posture than plan, but still a threat. "That's enough," Rourke said, like he had suddenly located a spine in a drawer. The air thinned. Someone's pen clicked, stopped, clicked again. Elena remained very still, voice low. "Distance," she said. "Note it." The sergeant wrote the number 2 again without meaning to. Mercer swallowed and let his hand fall, but his eyes stayed mean, a man who had always been rewarded for theater rehearsing the next line. Then, before anyone could select a script, a door at the end of the corridor swung open and the room reset around a new axis. Every uniform in the building knew that door by sound and by rumor. It opened onto the executive hallway. The man who stepped through wore a slate suit and quiet authority like matched fabrics. He moved without hurry and without noise, an economy that made other motion look wasteful. Chief Daniel Ruiz, 50 composed, the kind of leader whose silence edits a room, crossed the lobby. Phones seemed to dim themselves. Conversations died mid-syllable. Even the fluorescent buzz took a step back. Elena did not move. Mercer straightened, arranging his posture into a salute that wasn't one. Rourke looked like he'd forgotten the word, for sergeant, Ruiz's eyes cut a clean line through the lobby, gathering facts faster than most people gather breath. He took in the sealed paper sleeve containing shears, the complaint form Rourke had turned from afterthought into record, Dalton's stare fixed at a neutral point near his boots, Mercer's belated, performative authority, Elena's posture, still as ice, warmer than fury. The chief's face, usually a study in controlled sternness, shifted almost imperceptibly when he saw the evidence bag. The room felt it like a pressure change before a storm. Mercer launched his line the instant an audience arrived, eager to be first into the record he'd invented. "Chief Ruiz, sir," Mercer said, louder than necessary, the word sir wrapped in ownership he hadn't earned. "Good you're here. This woman came in making false accusations after I subdued her this morning." He gestured to the bag with a confident flourish he hoped looked rehearsed rather than desperate. Ruiz did not turn his head. His gaze remained on Elena. He didn't seem to register Mercer's existence as anything but environmental noise, like the hum of the HVAC. Rourke felt the shiver run through the room, shock mixed with recognition, authority choosing its subject with surgical intent. Mercer blinked, then tried again, softer, as if volume was the problem. "Chief, she was erratic," Mercer said. "Weaponized a branch. I de-escalated. She tore her dress." Still nothing. Ruiz's eyes stayed with Elena, reading, measuring, worried in a way that didn't fit bureaucracy. It was not the curiosity of command. It was personal. The chief's expression softened into something rarely seen by anyone wearing a badge, concern with edges rounded by affection. The room recalculated, but had not yet solved the equation. Mercer felt the math turning lousy in his gut and hurried to add numbers. "We've got it contained," he added, as if control could be asserted by declaration. "No need to tie up the command suite." Ruiz closed the distance without looking at Mercer or the sergeant or anyone else. He stopped in front of Elena and took the evidence bag from her hand as if it weighed more than fabric ever could. He set it gently on the counter. Then he did a thing that cracked the world along a hidden seam. He put his arms around her, not awkwardly, not tentatively. He gathered her in like something infinitely precious, rested his chin briefly on her hair, and breathed. The room inhaled a gasp, so quiet it felt like a draft. Mercer forgot how to stand. Dalton found the wall with the back of his shoulder. "Elena, are you all right?" Ruiz asked, his voice pitched to her and no one else. It carried anyway, settling over the lobby like a clean sheet. "I got your message. I was on my way to meet you." He leaned back enough to search her face. There was tenderness and anger, and the steadying discipline of a man used to catastrophes. Rourke had turned the color of paper. His pen, still in his hand, made a small clack against the counter. Mercer stared, the name colliding in his head with the last name printed on the office door, both refusing to blur into coincidence. The syllables lined up in every mind present, a brutal little parade of facts. Chief Daniel Ruiz, Dr. Elena Ruiz, husband, wife. The people everyone knew existed in abstraction, but had never seen occupy the same frame. Elena nodded once, measured. "I'm okay," she said. Shaken, not hurt. Ruiz's eyes flicked to the shears sleeve, then to Mercer for a fraction of a second that felt like winter crossing a threshold. The chief's hand settled once at Elena's elbow, an anchoring touch. Around them, conversation didn't so much stop as surrender. The TV droned into irrelevance. The lobby's clock ticked with indecent volume, as if shocked into honesty. On the benches, civilians adjusted into postures of deliberate invisibility, as if stillness could save them from being noticed by history. Officers found irrelevant tasks, then couldn't remember how to perform them. A detective whispered, "Oh no," without meaning to move their mouth. Rourke's hierarchy-saturated brain sprinted through collisions. Intake form, complaint, evidence, command, spouse, conflict of interest, policy, reality. Mercer's confidence, habit-formed and performance-fed, shivered and cracked. He tried on a smile and realized his face had lost the trick. Dalton, who had seen many rooms bend before uniforms, watched this one bow toward the woman in the long coat and the man who had chosen to hold her. Everyone in the precinct had known, in the way people know things they never verify, that the chief was married. No one had met her. No one had seen her stand in this lobby with a torn silk dress inside a bag, the rip like a gash through ceremony. Mercer felt the ghost of the earlier sneer he'd worn when he'd said lady and you're kind. That ghost put its cold fingers around his neck now. The certainty that had carried him for 12 years failed to report for duty. He could feel consequence assembling just out of sight, tools clicking into trays, a procedure commencing. He replayed his motions, the lunge, the bite of steel, the gratified breath after the cut, and realized how bright they would look under a better light. He remembered joking about maintenance tickets for body cams and felt for the first time the specific weight of the word malfunction when someone else held the pen. His mouth tasted like old copper. He tried to catalog allies in the room and came up with shadows, then blinking faces, then no one he trusted to hold his version steady. The narrative he'd filed felt like an egg held too hard. He could sense the hairline crack, invisible until it wasn't. The dread didn't rush. It seeped. It started in the gut, an iciness that argued with his heartbeat, then moved outward into fingers and cheeks. It stripped him of the practiced repertoire, the shrug, the laugh, the bored squint. He recognized the look in the chief's eyes when they finally touched him. Clinical appraisal, not rage. That frightened him more. Rage could be dodged, matched, provoked. Appraisal measured, documented, acted. It weighed a career against policy and gravity. Mercer tried to anchor himself in contempt, at her coat, at the dress inside the bag, but the contempt slid off, found nothing to stick to. The lobby clock ticked again. Elena leaned into her husband for a breath, then straightened, her composure precise and earned. She looked at him and then let her gaze drift with surgical slowness to Mercer. "Daniel," she said, voice steady enough to hold instruments. "This man happened." Ruiz's eyes followed the line of her regard and landed on Mercer like a verdict being read, not shouted, not dramatized, delivered. The chief's face didn't change much. It didn't need to. Around them, the room's center of gravity shifted, not in inches but in certainties. Dalton exhaled, a sound he hadn't permitted himself. Rourke lowered his pen as if it suddenly weighed several pounds. "Officer Mercer," Chief Ruiz said, his voice so controlled it carried heat. "My office, now." He didn't raise the volume. He didn't have to. The words reached corners the lobby had forgotten it owned. "Officer Dalton," he added, turning the measured blade of his gaze to the partner who'd tried to dissolve into cinderblock. "You as well." The order pulled both men out of their poses and into a hallway that had never felt longer. Ruiz touched Elena's forearm once more, a promise, simple and sufficient, and then stepped toward the executive door. Mercer followed, each footfall loud, each step a nail he could finally hear being driven. "And bring a copy of the report you filed this morning." The performance was done. The mask had slipped. Upstairs, room 3C waited, the kind of space where noise gets swallowed and excuses turn thin. Cinderblock, beige paint, a bolted metal table, 3 chairs, no window, a one-way mirror like a lid. Officer Hank Mercer sat jittering, knuckles jumping against steel. Officer Troy Dalton looked seasick. Across from them, Chief Daniel Ruiz didn't raise his voice or posture. He settled, perfectly still. In the corner, Dr. Elena Ruiz watched without a word, presence sharp as a scalpel, living evidence that refused to be filed away or forgotten or outweighted. It was a room engineered to unmake people. Mercer's breath came shallow, scraped. Dalton's gaze kept skittering to the mirror and back. Ruiz steepled his hands, level look unwavering, the quiet authority of a surgeon before an incision. No threats, no theatrics. Just a pressure that tightened the longer it stayed polite. Elena's silence charged the air more than shouting could. She wasn't an audience. She was consequence. The chief slid a printout across the table. Mercer's incident report. Neat paragraphs stacked like a scaffold of lies. For the record, Ruiz said, voice even. Walk me through it, start to finish. Nothing omitted. It was the last open door. Mercer could have walked back through truth. He grabbed the script instead, clutching it like driftwood. Sir, he began, voice catching. As reported, we responded to Oak Creek Lane. The subject, Dr. Ruiz, was erratic. Ruiz repeated it, weighing the word. Erratic. Define. Mercer glanced at Dalton, found no help. Agitated, shouting, unstable, he said too fast. She lifted a broken limb. One end was sharpened. Ruiz's expression didn't flicker. Sharpened? Like a spear someone whittled? Mercer seized the prompt. Yes, sir. Improvised weapon. The old rhythm tempted him forward. She ignored commands. Clear threat to officer safety. Across the room, Elena shifted her weight. The tiny sound hollowed his confidence. Ruiz leaned in an inch. The dress, he said mildly. Your report says she tore it on the weapon she was wielding. Explain the mechanics. Mercer swallowed. She lunged. I sidestepped, used minimal force, disarmed her. During the struggle, fabric snagged on a splinter. A struggle, Ruiz echoed softly, as if testing a wire for tension. So you're asserting my wife, an experienced pediatrician, physically attacked you, a much larger trained officer, and in that contact her clothing accidentally ripped. That is your official account? The word official hung like a ceiling fan with a loose screw, ready to drop. Yes, sir, Mercer said, sweat stippling his temples, paper-thin bravado crinkling. Ruiz turned, gaze landing on Dalton. Officer Dalton, you witnessed the event as described? Dalton's throat worked. His eyes darted, then pinned to the tabletop. He tried mush for an answer. Sir, it happened fast. Ruiz didn't blink. That isn't the question. Did you see Dr. Ruiz, armed with a sharpened branch, lunge at Officer Mercer? Silence stretched until it felt like altitude sickness. Dalton heard himself say, Yes, sir. The choice came out small but final, a knot tied to Mercer's sinking weight. Ruiz took the lie the way an ER doc takes a pulse, confirming what he already knew, feeling for how bad the problem was. And the body cam? Ruiz asked, finally letting disappointment shade the words. Your report says it failed. Battery issue. Mercer nodded too quickly. Unfortunate timing, yes. I've already sent it to maintenance. Unfortunate, Ruiz agreed, tone frosting over. He lifted a small tablet, set it between them like an instrument on a tray. More unfortunate is forgetting policy 7.4, automated cloud sync. He tapped. Let's review your morning from your vantage. The screen woke to crystal footage with a timestamp. 10:13 a.m., audio clean as glass. What's the call? Dalton's recorded voice. Bored. Mercer's recorded voice. Contempt, curled into words. Some complainer about a branch. We'll shut her up quick. Mercer's face in the room washed out. The dead battery had faithfully kept score. On screen, the cruiser rolled to the curb. The lens followed Mercer's eyes, locking on Elena. Well, look at this, his own voice sneered from the past. Lost, sweetheart? The frame drifted, lingering on the dress like an unblinking insult. Bet she shoplifted that. Ruiz paused the video. Your written statement says you encountered an agitated subject, he said evenly. The woman here is measured. Explain the discrepancy. Mercer's mouth opened and found no language. Ruiz pressed play. The lens recorded the steps forward, the steel glint, the ugly cadence of exclusion dressed up as authority. Then the line that would not wash off. Let me help with your dress code violation. The camera jolted with Mercer's lunge. Fabric tore through the speakers, a soft, obscene rip that made Dalton physically flinch in the present tense room. The frame froze on shears biting silk, magnolias halved. Ruiz touched the tablet, voice still calm. Your report says a branch tore it during a struggle. This shows you using garden shears. That's destruction of property and assault with a weapon. Before enhancements, Dalton covered his face with both hands. Mercer stared like a man watching a wave reach the cliff he built from sand and arrogance. Let's continue, Ruiz said, and the video obliged. Mercer's recorded gloat. There, now get lost. Go back where you came from, before I trim something else. Ruiz stopped it and swiped to a second feed. Officer Dalton, you testified she lunged. This is your camera. The angle changed to Dalton's board lean against the cruiser, the entire assault captured without shake, without ambiguity, no lunge, no branch lifted. Elena, unmoving, composed. Ruiz let the silence work. Then a third file opened, a crisp exterior view from a nearby storefront, the whole sidewalk in wide, unforgiving clarity. 3 angles, 1 truth. The report's scaffolding folded with a quiet, terminal creak. Ruiz powered the tablet down and set it softly on metal. The room found a new stillness, the kind after a verdict lands. Mercer tried to breathe around it. The air felt rationed. You didn't just harm a resident, Ruiz said, eyes on him. You assaulted my wife. Then you conspired with your partner to memorialize an invented danger. You lied to a supervisor and repeated it in here. He tapped the table once. That's perjury. That's official misconduct. That's filing a false instrument. Stackable, understand? The words didn't rise. They drilled. Do you want to amend your statement? Mercer's mouth moved. Excuses spilled. Thin, frantic, doomed as soap bubbles. Sir, I didn't know who she was. It was a lapse. Stress. Bad day. Ruiz lifted a palm. Stop. The single syllable flattened the scramble. You think this hinges on her last name? On your ignorance of it? His voice carried a weariness older than the morning. If this had been any person on that sidewalk, it would be the same crime. The difference today is that the machinery you rely on answered to me for an hour. He reached down and set a thick manila folder on the table. It thudded with history. The tab read, Mercer, Hank. I took a walk through your past. It's rancid. He opened to a paper with a curled corner. 2012. Traffic stop. College kid named Elias Vaughn. Broken taillight. Corrected itself at impound. You told him his car didn't look like it belonged to him. Complaint. Dismissed. A page turn. 2014. Henderson family calls about next door party. You arrest Mr. Henderson for interfering when he asks why you're hassling him. Overnight in jail. Charges dropped. Force within policy. With each citation, Mercer seemed to narrow, the chair suddenly too large. Dalton stared as if the file might redraw itself if he focused hard enough. It didn't. The record kept on speaking, cold and chronological. 2017, Ms. Aisha Taylor, Ruiz continued. Jaywalking. You cuff her, park her on a curb, 45 minutes to run warrants because she challenged your tone. She had no record. Complaint. Unsubstantiated, after your partner echoed your phrasing. He let the words drift toward Dalton like a mirror. Sound familiar? Dalton didn't lift his head. 34. Ruiz said, the number landing with the clean weight of a gavel. 34 complaints in 12 years. Excessive force, verbal degradation, profiling, bad searches, every single one unfounded or within policy. Why? Because your reports sang and your partners harmonized and the culture provided the chorus. The folder stayed open, reeking truth. He leaned closer, voice dropping until it felt intimate and cutting. Each line in here is a person. Someone's mother, father, kid. They didn't have my phone number. They had a process you learned to game. Ruiz nudged the file toward Mercer with 2 fingers. You aren't a guardian. You're a growth the body should have cut out years ago. He stood, shadow falling across the table like a curtain closing. Today you made it impossible to ignore. No more filing cabinets. No more technical language to cushion harm. The last sentence didn't spike. It thudded. You showed us what you are. Now you live with that clarity. Effective immediately, Ruiz said, the formality crisp as a stamped seal. Both of you are suspended without pay, pending termination. Dalton's breath snagged. Mercer sagged. Mercer, badge, sidearm, ID, on the table. You are barred from this building unless accompanied by union counsel. Expect charges: assault, criminal mischief, official misconduct, filing a false report, and a federal civil rights referral. Each offense stacked like bricks. A shaky, "Please, Chief, my family," crawled out of Mercer and fell flat. Ruiz didn't soften. Every family you've humiliated had dinners interrupted by phone calls that started with your voice, he said. Accountability isn't vengeance, it's hygiene. He nodded toward the door. Internal affairs. Escort. An IA captain stepped in like a period at the end of a long sentence. Collect lockers. Off premises within the hour. Chairs scraped. Metal kissed tabletop. Badge, weapon, plastic card. Dalton moved as if gravity had increased. Mercer shook once, hard, like a man rebooting and failing. When the door shut behind them, the room exhaled. Ruiz crossed to Elena and knelt, rank discarded for something older. You sure you're okay? He asked. Her composure cracked just enough to reveal the depth beneath. One tear made a path and vanished. I will be, she said. But he wasn't wrong about the machine. What about the person who isn't married to you? Ruiz met her eyes, and something in him anchored to a vow. That, he said, changes now. He didn't return to the office. He walked with Elena straight into the bullpen, the loud heart of the building, and planted himself in its center. Listen up, he called, not shouting, amplifying. Conversations died mid-syllable. Chairs spun, a dozen small denials stalled. Faces turned, rookies and lifers, tired saints, and practiced cynics. What happened out there wasn't an aberration, Ruiz said. It's a symptom. The wall you've mistaken for loyalty is where justice has been suffocating. He didn't pace. He let the words move instead, deliberate as a marching line. The audit starts today, he continued. Every use of force file, every complaint from the last 5 years, pulled, read, reread, and, where patterns emerge, reopened by an outside agency. No more grading our own tests. A stir moved through the room. Some faces hardened, others unmasked relief. Body cams, Ruiz said. If your camera fails during force, the presumption shifts against you pending review. Documentation isn't optional. It's the spinal cord. A detective muttered something about unions. Ruiz didn't blink. Then file your grievances. Meanwhile, we'll be the most accountable shop in the country, or we won't be a shop at all. If that makes you itchy, resign. A silence followed that wasn't agreement, but wasn't defiance either. It felt like ground giving under old roots. Ruiz let it hold. We serve the people who pay for these lights, he said. Not the fictions we write to spare ourselves discomfort. He scanned faces, veterans whose eyes slid, rookies whose chins lifted, supervisors calculating policy from posture. You've heard speeches before, he added. You haven't seen this file. And he raised Mercer's folder like a relic of a faith they were renouncing. Read it. Remember, every page is a life. He lowered it. We start by telling the truth in ink, on camera, and in rooms like this. The work began as noise, printers whirring, keyboards ticking, evidence clerks calling down, records pulled from shelves that smelled like dust, and old decisions. Elena stood beside Ruiz, not as symbol, but as witness to the pivot. In the days that followed, cases unspooled. Names once tagged, unfounded, breathed again. Apologies were drafted without passive voice. Money moved, yes, settlements and stipends, but more importantly, doors opened to expungements, to return to dignity, to phone calls that didn't end with, "We regret." The black silk dress stayed folded in a clear sleeve at home, a relic not of shame but of a line someone chose to draw and keep drawing. When the county charged Mercer and Dalton, the arraignment felt less like spectacle than plumbing finally fixed. Discovery was a mirror, triplicate angles, synced timestamps, one narrative. The jury didn't take long. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Under color of law became a phrase people stopped glazing over at. The department's audit made the evening news for a month straight, not for scandal bait, but for the boring, necessary discipline of policy turned practice. Officers who'd relied on the old shrug either adapted or departed. Recruits memorized a new catechism: camera up, report straight, intervene when your partner forgets who they are. Accountability migrated from poster to muscle memory. In community rooms that smelled like coffee and floor wax, the chief took questions without flinching. He didn't pretend the past was a blip. He called it a habit. He explained presumptions, chains of custody, public dashboards that let people click their way through what used to be locked drawers. Some nights got heated. He stayed put. "You're not here to like me," he said once. "You're here to test the work." Elena spoke too, about proximity and humiliation, about why tearing a dress is not just property, about how medicine taught her to chart in verbs that don't hide actors. People listened. Some nodded. Some cried. All remembered. The department did what bureaucracies rarely do. It kept going. The memo about malfunctioning cams didn't gather dust. It gathered signatures. An outside panel, retired judges, a civil rights lawyer, a community organizer who'd buried a nephew, began redlining old norms. Promotion slowed for the performatively tough and sped for the stubbornly ethical. The phrase "within policy" lost its power to end conversations. It became an opening question. Meanwhile, in a clear garment sleeve on a bedroom shelf, magnolias stitched in white stayed halved. Elena chose not to mend the seam. It belonged to the city now, a scar catalog, a reminder that fabric and systems both rip along stress lines. When people asked Elena what moment mattered most, she surprised them. Not the video reveal, not the verdict. The quiet, she said, the sound of a room deciding to hear. She meant the lobby, the breath before Ruiz crossed to her, the instant when uniforms learned an old reflex wouldn't be rewarded. She also meant 3C, beige walls, and the thin metallic ring when a badge hits a table. Those sounds carried further than sirens. Mercer's name became shorthand among rookies, not a villain to hate, but a caution to study, how small permissions add up to a culture, how a report can launder harm if no one reads closely. Years aren't cured by a single policy, and Ruiz didn't pretend otherwise. He missed dinners. He wrote notes in the margins of memos at red lights. He apologized badly, and then better. He fired people he'd laughed with. He called the DA when politics got itchy. He slept less. Elena returned to the ICU and kept doing the hard, merciful arithmetic that medicine demands, but she also sat on a civilian board 2 Thursday nights a month, reading files with the same attention she gave a child's chart. She learned the codes and ductwork of this other body, the department, with a clinician's suspicion for symptoms disguised as procedures. Not everyone cheered. Anonymous letters arrived. A union vote got loud. A city council member tried to turn the audit into a cudgel and discovered the numbers didn't swing that way. Meanwhile, something quieter took hold. Traffic stops that felt like conversations. Reports that read like events instead of theater. Partners who put hands on forearms and said, "Let me take this," when someone's voice went sharp. The public dashboard got clicks at 2 a.m. from insomniacs who'd once sworn off hoping. trust didn't bloom. It accreted, granular, stubborn, like lichen. Elena's dress stayed folded, its rip precise, a line that time didn't heal because it shouldn't. On a rainy anniversary of that morning, Ruiz stood at the corner where the limb had fallen. The maples were leafed again, the sidewalk clean, the street sign still bright against cloud. He remembered the rip, not the noise, but the intention behind it, and felt a familiar, useful anger that didn't need volume. Elena joined him with coffee in paper cups. They didn't say much. You don't narrate a scar to the person who shares it. They watched a cruiser roll by, slow and ordinary. The officer inside lifted 2 fingers in a nod that wasn't performance. It looked like work being done, the dull kind that holds. In classrooms at the academy, instructors rewrote scenario scripts. Recruits practiced stepping between a partner and a bad habit. They learned that non-compliant isn't a magic word and that cameras fail less when officers want them to work. They watched the 3-angle footage as training, not spectacle, and then wrote what they saw without adjectives. Some flinched. Good. In roll calls around the city, sergeants stopped sighing when someone said policy and started asking, "Show me." An older cop retired early rather than change. A younger one stayed because change had edges he could climb. Elena spoke once to a graduating class. "Precision is love," she said. "Use both." By the time headlines cooled, habit had the wheel. Supervisors spot-checked random reports. Auditors called on Tuesdays just to ask if any battery had died lately. The DA's office learned to request cloud sync logs reflexively. The community board's monthly meeting became standing room for boring reasons, because the agenda promised updates that trusted people with specifics. In homes where police radios once sounded like weather, families learned to expect callbacks. In squad cars where jokes used to curdle, someone set a different tone and it held. The dress stayed in its sleeve. Sometimes Elena took it down, not to touch, but to look, to remember the hinge. In the end, if there is one, Mercer and Dalton's names lived mostly in paperwork and footnotes. The city cut checks, signed letters, changed forms. The department learned the discipline of receipts. Some nights Ruiz sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a headache and the stubborn belief that boring is beautiful when it comes to justice. Elena refilled his mug and didn't tell him to rest. They had both chosen a long fight with no applause. She taught residents how to chart pain without minimizing it. He taught lieutenants how to read reports for the silencers between phrases. Their marriage made room for both kinds of triage. If you asked them privately what single tool mattered most, neither said power. Ruiz said process, because good process outlives any one person's will. Elena said eyes, because a witness changes outcomes even when they don't speak. Together they'd add story, because a true account, told cleanly and preserved, refuses burial. The precinct's lobby kept its hum. Plastic chairs still squeaked. Someone always brought donuts that went stale by noon. Yet the air was different, as if the building had learned a new way to hold itself upright. People came in with fear and left with papers that reflected reality. A small thing, the kind that adds up. Sometimes the city tried to hand them credit, and they handed it back. Credit didn't matter as much as continuity. A rookie in a precinct across town sent Elena a note about intervening when her FTO went sharp. A grandmother mailed Ruiz a church program with a scribble. "Thank you for the callback." The dashboard got a new feature. Complaints tracked from intake to resolution, names redacted, process visible. Someone on late shift printed the page and tacked it to a corkboard under a hand-lettered sign, receipts. The paper curled at the edges, then got replaced by a fresh one, an act as small and stubborn as trust. There were setbacks. A traffic stop went sideways. A supervisor failed upward. A memo got watered down by a committee, and Ruiz hauled it back. A council hearing turned into a performance, and Elena left early to make morning rounds. They were reminded often that culture doesn't flip. It regrades one layer at a time. Still, the audit stayed alive. The outside panel kept its teeth. The Academy's scenarios didn't backslide into old myths. Officers got used to narrating what their hands were doing. Cameras caught boredom and courtesy as often as adrenaline. Quiet files filled with evidence of nothing happening because people remembered who they were. On the anniversary most people didn't mark, Elena opened the clear sleeve and let the dress breathe for a minute. She didn't reach for a needle. She traced the line of the cut with her eyes and thought about the morning when a man chose humiliation as a tactic and discovered the limits of his universe. She folded the silk again, neat, deliberate. In the other room, Ruiz was on the phone, saying, "Show me. Pull it. No, we're not waiting for the next meeting." She smiled at the familiar cadence. Precision as love, love as policy, policy as protection. None of it poetic, all of it necessary. The question people love to ask, what changed everything, never had a single answer. 3 angles of video, yes. A woman who refused to shrink, yes. A man with the authority to pull threads and keep pulling, yes. But also a clerk who tagged evidence right, a rookie who wrote the dullest, truest report in her class, a sergeant who decided to underline instead of sigh. Change is a choir, not a solo. The old wall didn't explode. It eroded, a handful of sand at a time. Somewhere, a future officer learned that within policy wasn't a shield if the policy itself couldn't face daylight. That was the point. As for Mercer and Dalton, their trials ended. Their appeals failed. Their names receded to the margins alongside dates and cause numbers. The city made its payments. The public moved on to other battles. Inside the department, a new reflex hardened. When a story smelled scripted, someone reached for a file, a feed, a log. Trust, but verify, an old detective muttered. Then amended, verify, then trust. On a Tuesday morning, a lieutenant stopped a briefing to say, "If your camera dies, you pull your car from service." Period. No one argued. They wrote it down. Policy turned again into posture. Posture into habit. Habit into character. On a bright winter afternoon, Ruiz walked past the lobby where it began. The same hard chairs, the same TV looping weather, different gravity. He saw a woman at the counter with a complaint, watched the sergeant lean forward, listened for the tone. It was procedural, not performative. He kept walking, not because it didn't matter, but because it finally didn't require him. In the evening, he and Elena ate late. They talked about a child who'd turned a corner in the ICU and a patrol shift where nothing exciting happened. Victories of equal weight. The dress stayed where it was, saying everything it needed to say by staying torn. If the city wanted a moral, Elena would offer something plain. Tell the truth and keep receipts. Ruiz would add, build systems that force truth to the surface. Between them, they'd leave room for luck and the grace of ordinary people doing their jobs. They'd also point back to a morning on a sunlit street where a single ugly choice exposed an entire architecture. That revelation hurt. It also helped. No one gets redemption by accident. They get maintenance. In roll call, someone taped up a printout, the 3-angle stills beside a new policy paragraph, and scrawled across the top, "Never again is a decision." The paper stayed up. On bad days, Elena still heard the rip. On good ones, she heard pencils scratching honest reports, body cam chimes syncing to servers, apologies spoken without spin. She didn't confuse accountability with perfection. She preferred it to fantasy. Some nights, she stood at the window and watched a cruiser drift by under the maples, tires hissing. She didn't flinch. A neighbor once asked whether she'd ever wear silk again. "Of course," she said. "Beauty isn't the problem." The neighbor nodded, embarrassed by the simplicity. Elena closed the window against the chill and left the sleeve sealed on the shelf, a private museum of a public promise kept. Ruiz sometimes thought about the first time he'd held a badge, how light it felt, how much weight it pretended to carry. He thought about the men who'd taught him and the things they hadn't. He wrote them letters he'd never send. He also wrote memos he absolutely sent, the kind that outlives a chief. In a folder labeled Succession, he tucked a list: trust the camera, back the truth teller, kill the euphemisms, audit forever. He didn't believe in monuments. He believed in calendars and checklists and people whose names would never trend. On weekends, he and Elena walked Oak Creek Lane, and the street felt like itself again. They never staged a victory lap. They kept showing up. In houses once wary of calling 911, people dialed and didn't rehearse a defense before someone answered. In cars once certain a stop meant humiliation, drivers rolled windows down without their throats closing. Those are feelings, yes, and feelings aren't policy, but they're the point of policy. Safety means you can imagine tomorrow without drafting an alibi. Elena said that to a room of young officers. A few wrote it down. Others will learn it the way people always do, by watching someone braver go first, and realizing bravery here is just refusing to lie when lying is easy. When the department's website crashed from too many clicks on the dashboard one night, a clerk laughed and swore and fixed it by morning. Transparency turned out to be like any infrastructure. Sometimes it leaks, and you patch it. The outside panel published its first annual report. It was boring in the right ways, laced with charts and footnotes and sentences that started with verbs. The local paper ran a headline without a pun. At roll call, a sergeant passed around a printout that read, "If the footage and the form disagree, the footage wins." No one groaned. Someone underlined it. Later, someone else underlined the underline. None of it gave back the exact morning Elena lost: the quiet walk, the magnolias intact, the certainty that sunlight guarantees decency. That certainty wasn't worth much anyway. What she got instead was sturdier, proof that ordinary tools, held without cowardice, can break bad habits. A mirror, a camera, a clean sentence, a partner who refuses complicity. A chief who remembers his oath is to the public first. She'd have preferred not to learn it that way, but learning is not bargaining. Sometimes it's a rip. Sometimes it's a file you refuse to close. Sometimes it's the hum of a building that has decided to behave differently. When people argued online about what had mattered, the camera, the witness, the person in power choosing right, Elena didn't pick a single winner. She'd seen intubations where 3 hands kept a child alive. Which hand mattered most? All of them, because the point was the breath. The argument missed the truth. Justice is collaborative, or it isn't. That didn't make it fragile. It made it reproducible. If one element fails, another can hold until repair arrives. That's design, not miracle. She told that story to a reporter once and asked them not to quote her. They did anyway. She shrugged. If a good line travels, let it. As for the dress, it never went back on. It didn't need redemption. It was an artifact. Some nights, Elena imagined cutting it into ribbons and handing a strip to every recruit with their badge. Then she decided she liked it whole, even torn, the way a healed bone holds memory in new calcium. On a quiet Sunday, she moved the sleeve to a different shelf, not to hide it, but to keep it where she could see it without looking up. She made tea. Ruiz read policy changes on his phone and pretended not to. They practiced a faith in the unglamorous: pages, batteries, signatures, eyes. If you wandered into the bullpen a year later, you might be disappointed by how normal it looked. That would be the success. Paperwork stacked. Radios murmured. A rookie asked a question that sounded naive but wasn't. A lieutenant corrected a report without sarcasm. A corporal walked a complaint to records instead of the circular file. It wasn't goodness, it was competence with a conscience. People train themselves to feel weird when procedure bent. The one-way mirror upstairs reflected ordinary interviews, not theater. Down the hall, the evidence room logged things in and out with the calm of a grocery list. The miracle was repetition. When Elena spoke to a neighborhood group, someone asked if she forgave Mercer. She said forgiveness wasn't her job, prevention was. The room went quiet, then hummed with the relief of being told an adult answer. Ruiz asked the same question, said, "My job is subtraction, removing harm." Neither answer made a headline. They made sense. The city's attention drifted. Good. The work wasn't a show. In quiet kitchens, people told new stories about calling the police. Nothing dramatic, just decent. In cars, kids watched officers wave with an open hand, not a flashlight beam. None of that's proof. It's evidence. Enough of it and you can rest. On a breezy afternoon, Elena met a young officer in the lobby, the same space where gravity had once flipped, and the woman blurted, "I was there that day." She meant the lobby. "I didn't do anything. I'm sorry." Elena considered the confession, then shook her head. "You're here now," she said. "Do something next time. That's the only apology that counts." The officer nodded, eyes bright. Later, Elena told Ruiz. He didn't smile exactly, but something in his shoulders set down a weight. They weren't collecting conversions. They were building muscle. You don't clap for that. You count reps. You show up again. You keep the cameras rolling. If there was an ending, it was this. Nothing flashy, everything stubborn. A policy binder with dog-eared pages. A dashboard with too many clicks. A sergeant who says, "Show me," as reflex. A partner who steps in. A chief who understands that within policy means nothing if the policy cannot survive light. A doctor who remembers the sound of a rip and chooses every day to translate that pain into instructions someone else can use. The dress remains torn. The city remains imperfect. But the habit of telling the truth, on paper, on camera, in rooms where it would be easier to posture, has taken root. That's enough to keep. Ruiz liked to say that justice is logistics. Get the right evidence to the right desk at the right time in the right form. And don't let anyone pretend a timing error is fate. People rolled their eyes until the system caught a lie that used to slide. Then they listened. The precinct started celebrating weird victories. No malfunctions this quarter. All complaints acknowledged within 48 hours. 3 partner interventions documented. No force used. The bulletin board filled with numbers that meant lives not crumpled. Not sexy, not cinematic, necessary. Elena pinned a handwritten note next to the metrics. Precision is love. Someone underlined love twice. Most transparent in the country, started as a boast and became a baseline. Other cities called. Ruiz sent them boring memos and offered his outside panel's phone numbers. He told them the trick wasn't brave chiefs, it was processes that don't care who's in the chair. He also warned them the pushback never ends. Good. That means you're touching something real. Back home, the academy wall grew a new poster. Intervene, document, tell the truth. Recruits posed under it without irony. In the lobby, the old TV still muttered weather. The chairs still squeaked. People still arrived carrying fear. More often than not, they left carrying paper that told it straight. Mercer and Dalton will be footnotes in 5 years, and that's fine. The point isn't their downfall, it's the department's re-education. Elena keeps the dress intact as an argument against revisionism. When visitors ask, she tells it plain. A man cut it to make me feel small. Then the city decided not to be small with him. Ruiz doesn't frame proclamations. He preserves emails. He writes the kind of policies that read like recipes anyone can follow, the kind that make discretion unnecessary for decency to happen. At night, they sleep better. Not always. Enough. They earn that sleep with checklists and withstanding the itch to grandstand. So which tool wins? Camera, witness, or power used correctly? Elena answers. All 3, braided, because any single strand can snap. The camera preserves, the witness humanizes, the power operationalizes. None substitutes for the others. Together, they survive stress. She has seen small courage lead to large repairs, an intern speaking up, a sergeant refusing to fudge a timestamp, a neighbor saving footage others forgot existed. Ruiz has seen a policy save a person because it turned one leader's promise into a system's reflex. These are not miracles. They're choices made early and often. They're a city learning to inventory its character like any other asset. What do you think cuts deepest against injustice? A lens that doesn't blink, an eye that refuses to look away, or a badge that finally honors its oath? Maybe it's the chorus they form when none tries to sing solo. Have you watched a modest, brave act ripple into something sturdier than outrage, into process, into habit, into a different day? Tell it. Put it on paper. Say the names. Keep the files. Because every voice that chooses precision over posture adds weight to the scale. And in a room like 3C, where sound and hope used to go to die, the new noise is simple: receipts being made. Lesson 1. The rip that changed everything. For those of us who've seen America bend through decades of struggle, the story of Dr. Elena Ruiz cuts deep. Imagine a morning walk, sunlight through maple leaves, and then humiliation carved by steel. It wasn't just a dress that tore that day. It was the thin veil of illusion that justice always protects the innocent. For older Americans who've lived through civil rights marches and hard-won reforms, Elena's calm defiance reminds us that courage doesn't always shout. It stands its ground and demands truth in daylight. Lesson 2. Repair comes from relentless honesty. When Chief Ruiz exposed his own department's rot, it wasn't rage that fixed the system, it was persistence. He proved that change doesn't require grand speeches, only process, proof, and the refusal to look away. Those of us seasoned by time know this truth well. Moral repair is maintenance, not miracle. Friends, if Elena and Chief Ruiz's story stirred something in you, let's talk about it. Do you believe justice today depends more on brave individuals or on systems built to hold everyone accountable? Think about your own life, the times you saw wrongs quietly tolerated or courage quietly shown. Would you have spoken up like Elena did, or stayed silent to keep the peace? Share your reflections in the comments. Let's turn memory into movement. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, because every conversation we start brings America a little closer to the fairness we've always hoped for.